They say that curiosity killed the cat, but in my line of work, curiosity is the only thing that keeps me alive. I'm your host. Every week on this show, we bring you the most terrifying crimes and paranormal mysteries from around the globe. And tonight, we head to Long Island, New York, where a lonely stretch of beach concealed a terrifying secret. Over a decade, the remains of at least 10 victims were discovered in the marshes along Gilgo Beach. Women who vanished without a trace, families left without answers, and a community haunted by the question, who was the predator stalking the shadows? It all began in May 2010, when a woman out walking her dog discovered something strange on the beach. At first, she thought it was a mannequin, but as she got closer, she realized it was something far more sinister, a headless female torso. The discovery sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Gilgo Beach. Who could have done such a thing and why? As the investigation deepened, more secrets came to light. In the following months, the police found the remains of 9 more women, all young, all seemingly from different walks of life, all with one fatal similarity: they had all disappeared in mysterious circumstances. There were also 2 sets of unidentified remains, a man and a child, bringing the total number of victims to 11. But the questions kept piling up. Were these cases connected? If so, by what means? And if not, why did the killer choose this desolate beach as their dumping ground? As the media frenzy reached its peak, the pressure was on for the police to catch the killer. But every lead seemed to hit a dead end. With each passing day, the fear in the community grew. Parents kept their children indoors, lovers avoided the beach at night, and the once bustling boardwalk became a ghost town after sunset. The case baffled investigators. All of the victims had been strangled, but there was no sign of a struggle, and none of them had been reported missing in the same vicinity or within a similar time frame. It was as if the killer had struck at random, snatching their victims from different corners of Long Island. And then there were the ages of the victims. They ranged from 19 to 25, with most being in their early 20s. This suggested that the killer had no particular preference when it came to age, ruling out any common denominator among the victims. Then came the forensic breakthrough. The torso found in May 2010 was identified as Melissa Barthelemy, a 24-year-old escort who had vanished after meeting a client. DNA testing later revealed that all 10 women had been strangled by the same person. But despite having a lead, the investigation soon went cold. To this day, the identity of the Gilgo Beach killer remains a mystery. The case has been the subject of numerous documentaries, podcasts, and news specials, but the killer's true identity may never be known. And examining the latest theories that could finally bring justice to the victims of the Gilgo Beach massacre. See you then. The victims were primarily sex workers. Police believed the same man was responsible for all of them. But why did he choose this remote stretch of beach as his dumping ground? To answer that question, we need to delve deeper into the history of Gilgo Beach itself. Gilgo Beach sits about 30 miles east of New York City, where the open expanse of the Atlantic Ocean meets the manicured lawns of Long Island is Gold Coast Estates. This seemingly idyllic location has a darker history than many realize. It's a place where wealth and privilege have long met secrecy and sin. During the early 20th century, Gilgo Beach became a hub for bootlegging operations, supplying alcohol during the height of the U.S. Prohibition era. Its vast network of waterways provided the perfect cover for smuggling and distribution, making it a hotbed for organized crime. Figures from the 5 families of La Cosa Nostra had significant interests here, leading to a culture of fear and silence. Over the years, the criminal underworld continued to use Gilgo Beach as a base for various illicit activities. The area's secluded beaches and dense undergrowth became convenient spots for disposing of evidence or even bodies, a sinister secret buried beneath its seemingly tranquil surface. Fast forward to the late 20th century, Gilgo Beach's reputation as a somewhat exclusive destination remained unchanged. Its beaches were still frequented by wealthy socialites and celebrities seeking a getaway from the city. Yet lurking beneath this veneer of affluence and leisure were the remnants of its criminal past. Gang activity continued to persist, casting a long shadow over the community. Even as the decades passed, the legacy of organized crime at Gilgo Beach refused to fade away. Its deep ties to the mafia and other criminal organizations made it a place where secrets were buried, both literally and metaphorically, shaping its history in ways that few would have guessed. And these factors played a pivotal role when it came to the infamous Gilgo Beach killings. When Shannon Gilbert disappeared in May 2010, her case initially received little attention. After all, she was a 24-year-old sex worker who had gone missing after meeting a client. It wasn't until December of that year, when the first set of remains were discovered, that the case started to gain any traction. And even then, it was almost by accident. It wasn't until January of 2011 that the Gilgo Beach killings became widely known. And even then, it took several months for the connection between the different victims to be made. And even when the full scope of the killings became apparent, the initial response from law enforcement was slow and fragmented. Several agencies were involved in the investigation, but there wasn't a centralized command structure, and communication between them was lacking. This resulted in missed opportunities to connect the dots and hindered the progress of the investigation. It wasn't until later that a dedicated task force was established to oversee the investigation, and that led to some progress being made. However, even today, more than a decade later, the case remains unsolved and the killer still at large. Now let's talk about the crimes themselves. The Gilgo Beach killings were heinous and disturbing. The fact that multiple women had been murdered and disposed of in the same area was alarming in itself. But the brutality of the crimes was also shocking. Most of the victims had been strangled, indicating a level of violence that was terrifying. Additionally, the killer's choice of dumping grounds suggested a sense of familiarity with the area and a level of confidence that was unsettling. The impact of these crimes on the local community was profound. Fear and suspicion spread quickly, with many residents wondering if they might be next. The sense of vulnerability was palpable. Moreover, the nature of the victims, sex workers, initially led to stigmatization and victim blaming. Unfortunately, it took a long time for the focus to shift solely to the perpetrator and their actions. The public was slow to recognize the gravity of the situation and demand justice for these victims. It wasn't until much later that vigils and memorials were held and the victims were remembered as human beings whose lives mattered. The overall effect of the Gilgo Beach killings on society was significant. It highlighted the dangers faced by sex workers and brought the issue of human trafficking to the forefront. The case also raised questions about the effectiveness of law enforcement in such investigations and the need for better protocols and communication between agencies. Now let's look at the profile of the killer. Despite the passage of more than a decade, the identity of the individual responsible for the Gilgo Beach murders remains a perplexing enigma. Speculation has run rampant, with many theories proposed, but concrete evidence proving elusive. Law enforcement officials have pursued numerous leads, with investigators poring over countless hours of video surveillance, conducting extensive DNA analysis, and meticulously tracing digital footprints, all in an effort to unveil the true nature of this enigmatic individual. However, despite their tireless efforts, the mystery persists. Some believe that the culprit is a seasoned criminal with a history of violence, adept at evading authorities and capable of extreme acts. Others posit that the perpetrator may be someone seemingly ordinary, a person living an unremarkable life while harboring sinister secrets. As the investigation continues, each lead pursued, each piece of evidence analyzed, brings investigators one step further into the labyrinthine depths of this haunting case. Though answers remain elusive, the pursuit of justice for the victims drives the relentless determination to uncover the truth, no matter how elusive it may seem. The investigation into the Gilgo Beach murders has been plagued by setbacks and challenges, hindering the pursuit of justice for the victims. One significant obstacle has been the sheer number of investigators and agencies involved. With multiple jurisdictions and numerous individuals working on different aspects of the case, communication and coordination have often been lacking. This fragmented approach has resulted in duplicated efforts, missed connections, and a sense of confusion as to who is responsible for what. Furthermore, the passage of time has not been kind to the integrity of evidence. Crucial forensic evidence may have been compromised due to improper handling or a lack of resources for immediate analysis. Witness memories have also faded, making it more difficult to piece together the sequence of events leading up to the murders. These challenges are compounded by the stigma surrounding sex work. Many involved in the sex industry are reluctant to come forward with information out of fear of being stigmatized or further victimized. This hesitation has undoubtedly created barriers in the investigation process, limiting the pool of potential witnesses and information. Additionally, the vastness of the area where the bodies were found has presented its own set of challenges. The sprawling beaches and dense undergrowth have made the search for additional remains or evidence a daunting task. Despite these obstacles, investigators have shown unwavering commitment. They've revisited crime scenes, re-examined evidence, and pursued new leads relentlessly. Technological advancements have also aided the investigation, enabling forensic teams to analyze digital data and DNA samples with greater precision. However, as the years pass, the hope for a resolution fades, leaving many to wonder whether the truth will ever be unraveled. Despite the grim nature of the topic, the Gilgo Beach case offers a valuable lesson in the importance of thoroughness and interagency collaboration. Had those involved been quicker to connect the dots, perhaps some of the tragedy could have been avoided. Today, the memory of those lost serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of overlooking crucial details and the urgent need for continuous improvement in law enforcement practices. So there you have it, the gruesome tale of the Gilgo Beach murders, a chilling saga of violence and mystery that continues to haunt us. It's a cold winter night in December 2010 when 4 bodies are found washed up along Gilgo Beach. It's a horrific crime scene. 4 sets of human remains discovered within a quarter mile of each other. And as news of the gruesome find spreads, a sense of foreboding washes over the community. Could this be the work of a serial killer? But as the first investigation begins, it quickly becomes apparent that even finding the killer might be the easy part. For the next several weeks, as more victims are found and more theories emerge, it seems like every twist and turn only raises more questions than it answers. And no one could have predicted the web of deceit, distrust, and desperation that would follow. A short time later, another body is found less than a mile away. It's Melissa Barthelemy. She disappeared in July 2009, and her family never stopped searching for her. Now they have their answers, but none of them are good. With 5 bodies in close proximity, authorities know they have a serious situation on their hands. But as the Suffolk County Police Department takes the lead on the case, it's clear that they aren't exactly prepared for what comes next. Suffolk County Police Commissioner Richard Dorman announces that they've launched a full-scale investigation, but there's an immediate obstacle: limited resources. Over the past decade, the department has faced major budget cuts, and the force is stretched thin. Staff shortages and insufficient funding will be a theme throughout the investigation, leading some to believe that nothing will ever come of the probe before it even begins. How can anyone seriously investigate one of the most gruesome crimes in recent history with insufficient staffing and resources? But if not money, then surely clear communication can pave the way for success, right? Wrong. From the start, the investigation lacks coordination. When the medical examiner is called to the scene, they don't identify the victims as a group of murdered women until hours later. And it would be weeks before investigators even confirmed that all 5 victims had been strangled. This failure to recognize the similarities between the cases almost costs them dearly. One resident who lives near where the bodies were found had already tipped off police about suspicious activity in the area back in July 2010. He told them about a man he saw dragging a woman into the nearby woods, but his warning went nowhere. As weeks turned into months and the bodies piled up, people began to panic. Residents were afraid to walk on the beach or let their children play nearby. Business revenue dropped and everyone wanted answers, and they weren't the only ones desperate for information. Detectives from across Long Island were eager to solve this case, but they kept running into roadblocks. Early on, the Suffolk County Police Department insists that all 5 victims are connected, but as more bodies are discovered, they change their tune. They begin to hint that at least 2 different killers may be responsible for the deaths, seemingly contradicting themselves. These flip-flops confuse everyone involved, but they also prevent a unified investigation. On top of that, the cadaver dogs brought to the scene make disturbing discoveries, hinting that there may be more victims buried in the area. So why does the search continue to focus only on the beaches? Why aren't investigators looking in the marshlands, where Shannon Gilbert's cell phone was last pinged? It's a mystery that continues to baffle the public. As the investigation drags on without any solid leads or answers, tempers flare and accusations fly. Many of the victims were sex workers, and the families of the missing women fear that police aren't taking them seriously because of that. The late-night escorts had been working the streets of Long Island for years, catering to the affluent clientele from the nearby suburbs. But despite their profession, they were still somebody's daughters, sisters, and friends. And their relatives feel police are sending a message by failing to catch their killer. If these had been wealthy women from Long Island suburbs, they argue, the urgency would have been very different. And nobody feels this frustration more acutely than Shannon Gilbert's mother, Mary Gilbert. Her daughter vanished in July 2010 after a day of partying on Fire Island. She was last seen getting into a cab with a potential client. That same day, she called 911 in a panic, telling the operator someone was trying to kill her and that she feared for her life. But when police listen to the recording of that call, they hear nothing but static. To Shanna's loved ones, it sounds like Shanna desperately trying to get help, but police claim the line was dead, and they have no way of knowing what she said. They do, however, believe they have an answer as to what happened to her. They think she drowned accidentally in the marsh after getting lost while walking home from the Gilgo Beach train station. But her distraught mother refuses to believe it. At this point, the case has been under investigation for 6 months, and police have yet to name a suspect. Worse yet, they have no new leads, and nobody is any closer to figuring out what really happened. But suddenly, a tip comes in, and it promises to change everything. In May 2011, a fisherman spots something strange floating in the water near the Robert Moses Bridge. He pulls it out and finds another body, Amber Costello. She disappeared in September 2010, and her brother immediately recognizes her belongings found on the victim. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, and it looks like the case is going to get its first major break. Costello's body was found wrapped in burlap, and that detail alone sends shockwaves through the small community. All the previous victims had been wrapped in the same material. Now the connection is undeniable. This is the work of a serial killer. In the face of such grim evidence, police finally seem to be taking action. Suffolk County officials announce they are creating a dedicated task force to tackle the case, and they offer a reward for information leading to an arrest. But it soon becomes apparent that this, too, isn't enough. By August, a total of 10 bodies have been discovered, and the killer remains at large. The public is starting to lose patience. They blame the police for not doing more and question their every move. Media coverage of the case explodes, and leaks from inside the department reveal shocking details about the investigation. Several officers are implicated in a massive corruption scandal. One even claims that police purposely leaked misleading information to the press. And now people are wondering if anyone can be trusted. Just weeks earlier, a source revealed that a person of interest in the case had previously served prison time for manslaughter. But before police can question him, he leaves the country and heads to Thailand. It would be almost a year before he's brought back to the U.S. to face questioning. In the meantime, more bodies turn up, bringing the total to 11. And the biggest question on everyone's mind is, why hasn't the killer been caught? And then a new voice joins the chorus of criticism. Michael Dowd, the attorney for Shannon Gilbert's estate, claims police missed a golden opportunity to capture the killer. He says that if they had searched the areas where Shannon was last seen sooner, they might have found her alive. But as far as the public is concerned, it's too little, too late. In fact, they're starting to wonder if it was ever the police's intention to find the killer. Behind every headline were women with stories, families, and futures, stolen by the Long Island serial killer. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, was a single mother from Connecticut. She grew up in a small town and had 2 young children. According to her family, Maureen dreamed of being a dental hygienist and excelled at anything creative, from singing and dancing to writing poetry. But life wasn't easy. She married young, but the relationship didn't last long, and soon she was raising kids on her own. For her family, it was a shock when she called saying she was moving to Manhattan. She told them she'd enrolled in college, but that wasn't the whole truth. Maureen was struggling to make ends meet and worried she couldn't give her children enough. So she turned to escort work. On July 9, 2007, she told her mom she was taking a day trip to New York for a job interview. It sounded promising. Her father dropped her off at the train station, and she promised to be back soon. But Maureen never arrived home that night or the next day. Her dad began calling hospitals, and eventually her phone was located in a dumpster not far from where she'd boarded the train. Inside was her purse and some personal items, but no sign of his daughter. Family members immediately suspected foul play. After all, this was a woman who called her mom every day. So why was there no word for almost a week? Why had she suddenly left town? Or worse, why had someone taken her? The search continued for months, but there were no answers. Then in December 2010, Maureen's remains were found at Gilgo Beach, along with 3 other women. All had been strangled and dumped on the desolate stretch of sand. All were sex workers who had placed ads on Craigslist. All were now identified victims in one of America's most sinister crime sprees. Melissa Barthelemy, 24, had left Buffalo chasing independence in the city. The oldest of 4 sisters, she adored her younger siblings, especially her youngest sister, Crystal, who struggled in school. When Melissa was in high school, she started dating an older man, got pregnant, and dropped out. Soon she was raising a son and working as a waitress, but she still had dreams. She wanted to travel, see the world, and help her family along the way. So in July 2009, she moved to Manhattan. While living in a Brooklyn apartment with a friend, she met a string of unsavory characters, including dealers and pimps. She broke up with her boyfriend and fell into a dangerous crowd. According to her sister, Melissa began to change. At times, she seemed happy and hopeful, while at others she was paranoid and frightened. Her family believed she was being abused, and in the weeks before she disappeared, she mentioned a controlling man who took her phone whenever they argued. On July 13, 2009, she went missing after telling her roommate she was going to meet a client from an ad she placed on Craigslist. That same day, Melissa's phone was found abandoned in the parking lot of a shopping mall in Uniondale, New York. It was sent to the lab for analysis, but there was nothing to link it to a crime. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no news of Melissa. Then chilling phone calls began coming into her family's home. A man would call pretending to be a detective investigating his sister's disappearance. He berated Crystal, taunting her for being a bad child, and said he'd hurt her too. He called again in November and yelled obscenities at Crystal's mother, Dawn, who begged him to tell her where her daughter was. Instead, he mocked her, claiming he already had her and said she wouldn't be seeing her again. It was only then that Dawn realized the awful truth. The caller knew where Melissa was. and he was the one who took her. He was the one who killed her, and he wanted them to know. The clues led to Gilgo Beach, where in December 2010, Melissa's remains were found. Like so many of the Long Island victims, she'd been strangled and buried. Megan Waterman, 22, was from Maine. In the summer of 2010, she was staying at a Hauppauge, Long Island motel, where she'd been living with her boyfriend. But the relationship wasn't a good one, and according to friends, the situation was volatile. On June 6th, surveillance cameras captured her leaving the motel room alone. Later that day, she was seen getting into a car with an unknown man. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Investigators believe the driver was one of her regular clients. Megan had placed escort ads on Craigslist and worked regularly on Long Island. Her family remembered her as bubbly and loving, especially toward her daughter. After she disappeared, her mom spoke to the press asking whoever had Megan to bring her home. Days later, Megan's phone was found near the side of a road and her belongings in a parking lot. But still, there were no answers. Finally, in August 2011, her remains were found on Gilgo Beach. Amber Lynn Costello, 27, lived in North Babylon, Long Island. She had battled addiction, but those who knew her described her as kind, funny, and someone who always helped animals. In September 2010, she left home after arranging to meet a client. The case was unusual in that she wasn't a runaway or a drug addict and had deep ties to the community. Still, her friends admitted that she sometimes took money for sex and used drugs. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened next. On September 13th, she was reported missing. 3 days later, a friend told police she had gone out after placing a Craigslist ad and never returned. She'd been strangled. According to reports, before her death, Amber had confided in a friend that she was being stalked by a creepy man she'd met on the street. She'd been on her way to meet someone from an escort website and never came home. Although Amber's remains weren't found until 2011, authorities believe she may have been a victim as far back as 2009. Together, they became known as the Gilgo Four. Each was young, vulnerable, and had advertised escort services online. Each vanished after meeting a supposed client. But these weren't the only victims. Along the coast, investigators also found remains of unidentified women and even a toddler believed to be linked to one of them. Shannon Gilbert, 23, called 911 May 1st, 2010. She told the operator she was lost and needed help. She could hear cars driving by, but she was walking barefoot along a dark road in the Oakwood section of Suffolk County, New York. The operator kept asking her where she was, but Shanahan kept repeating the same directions over and over. Then she started screaming, saying she was being chased. The line went dead, and she was never heard from again. 5 days later, her flip phone was found on the side of a road nearby. But after an extensive search, there was no sign of her. And her disappearance quickly turned cold. Her family never gave up hope. And in 2011, Shannon's mother hired a private investigator. After combing through evidence in the case, he convinced police to dig deeper, leading to the discovery of her remains and the Gilgo Beach victims. Their stories shocked the nation and raised questions about how such a killer could operate for so long. Here were 4 young women who seemed completely different, yet all had been strangled and dumped on Gilgo Beach. All had been involved in escort work. But how did they find their way to that isolated stretch of sand? How did the killer choose his victims? And why did he taunt the families of his victims? Many theories emerged, but as each new victim was uncovered, more questions arose. How many women did the Long Island serial killer claim? Was he still out there? And would he ever be caught? These were just a few of the names connected to the case. For over a decade, the mystery of who was behind the killings has captivated the country. The investigation continues, but for many, the real mystery is why these names should forever be linked to one of the most bizarre killing sprees in American history. Gilgo 4, the evil serial killer still at large. It's been 12 years since the discovery of the bodies of 4 women on Long Island shocked the nation. Dubbed the Gilgo Four, these victims became the face of one of America's most infamous serial killer investigations. Yet despite countless leads and theories, the case remains chillingly unsolved. Today, we revisit the haunting details surrounding these women's murders, the prime suspects, and the lingering questions that continue to plague this enigmatic case. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate stretch of Gilgo Beach in Long Island, New York, a man stumbled upon a grim scene. What began as an ordinary evening turned into a nightmare when he found a torso washed ashore, an unsettling sight that no beachgoer should ever encounter. This chilling discovery marked the beginning of a terrifying tale, a journey into the depths of human darkness that would leave an entire nation on edge. The investigation quickly revealed a horrifying truth. The torso belonged to a woman, the first of many. As the authorities delved deeper into the case, more bodies surfaced, each telling a tale of unspeakable violence and leaving behind more questions than answers. A total of 10 sets of human remains were discovered along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, forming one of the most complex and haunting mysteries in recent history. Among the victims, 4 names resonated with the public: Megan Waterman, 22, Amber Costello, 27, Melissa Barthelemy, 24, and Maureen Brainerd, 92. These women, all linked to the escort industry, became known as the Gilgo Four. Their stories intertwined in a macabre dance of death, their fates sealed by a killer who remained elusive. The grim details surrounding the Gilgo Four's deaths sent shockwaves through the community. Each woman was found neatly wrapped in burlap, suggesting a disturbing level of sophistication and premeditation on the part of their killer. It was as if the killer had carefully concealed their identities and motives, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. But the mystery didn't end with the Gilgo Four. The investigation unearthed a darker reality. The remains discovered were not confined to a single location or time frame. Among them was a toddler, suggesting a killer who preyed on the most vulnerable. The inclusion of these young victims added a layer of horror to an already terrifying case, making it all the more haunting. The mere thought of such brutality committed within their midst sent shivers down the spines of the residents. In the close-knit community of Gilgo Beach and Oak Beach, located on the southern shore of Long Island, New York, rumors swirled. Many believed the killer was someone they knew, a face in the crowd, perhaps a neighbor who walked among them, always watching, waiting. The tranquil streets of Gilgo Beach, known for its white sand shores and luxurious homes, now bore the weight of a dark secret. The discovery of the bodies in this seemingly idyllic location shattered the illusion of safety and comfort. It was a stark reminder that evil could lurk in the most unexpected places. As weeks turned into months and months into years, the killer remained elusive. Speculations ran rampant, casting suspicion on everyone from seasoned criminals to seemingly ordinary individuals. The vastness of Long Island, with its sprawling suburbs and dense forests, provided a potential playground for a serial killer, making the search for answers even more daunting. Amidst the sea of faces, one name stood out: John B. Reiter. His connection to the case was a twist no one saw coming. While the Gilgo investigation stalled, Reiter found himself ensnared in his own web of deceit. Suspicions arose when he attempted to flee to Mexico. When apprehended, a trove of disturbing evidence was found in his possession, including a woman's torso in his freezer and a shocking confession. Reiter's chilling admission implicated him in the brutal murders of 2 women, adding another layer of complexity to the already convoluted case. However, despite this breakthrough, he denied involvement in the Gilgo killings, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Then came the startling revelation of a possible connection between Shannon Gilbert and the Gilgo Four. The missing sex worker's disappearance was initially treated separately, but new evidence suggested she may have been the first victim in a series of gruesome events. This revelation shook the foundations of the investigation, forcing a re-evaluation of every detail. Suddenly, what seemed like unrelated cases converged, pointing toward a chilling commonality. The fact that Shannon Gilbert disappeared while working as a sex worker has led some to believe that her case is separate from the Gilgo Four. However, others argue that the similarities between her case and the other murders are too striking to ignore. For instance, like many of the Gilgo victims, Gilbert was involved in the escort industry. Additionally, the location where her body was found is close to where the remains of the Gilgo Four were also discovered. Moreover, the cause of Gilbert's death, which remains undetermined, could potentially link her to the other murders. Despite the ongoing debate, it's important to consider the possibility that Gilbert's case is connected to the Gilgo Four, as it could provide valuable insight into the motive behind the killings. If the killer specifically targeted sex workers, then understanding the dynamics of that could be crucial in solving the case. Furthermore, exploring the connections between Gilbert's case and the Gilgo Four could lead to the discovery of additional evidence or witnesses that could shed light on the killer's identity. By considering all possible connections, investigators and researchers can ensure that no stone is left unturned in the pursuit of justice for these victims. Another compelling theory revolves around the chilling possibility of a serial killer ring operating in the area. This disturbing notion suggests that the killings may not have been the work of a lone individual, but rather a group of individuals working together to carry out their heinous acts. Such a conspiracy would explain the sheer number of victims and the meticulous nature of some of the killings. But proving the existence of a serial killer ring would require substantial evidence, something that has so far eluded investigators. In addition to the serial killer and serial killer ring theories, another intriguing possibility is that a single individual was responsible for some of the killings, while multiple individuals were responsible for others. This theory acknowledges the similarities among some of the victims, such as those found in the Gilgo Four, while also taking into account the variations in other cases. According to this theory, a particular killer may have operated in the area during a specific time period, targeting certain types of victims. However, other individuals or groups may have been responsible for the remaining killings. This theory allows for the possibility that different motives or sets of circumstances could have contributed to the various murders, making it a plausible explanation for the complexity of the case. Ultimately, this theory suggests that a combination of factors, both individual and societal, may have contributed to the tragic loss of life in the Gilgo Beach massacre. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case is the manner in which the bodies were disposed of. The killer showed a disturbing level of attention to detail, wrapping the bodies in burlap and disposing of them in remote areas of the parkway. This behavior suggests a high degree of planning and a desire to conceal the victims' identities. The killer's choice of burial locations also adds to the mystery. The fact that the bodies were found in close proximity to each other suggests that the killer was familiar with the area and wanted to create a central dumping ground for their victims. However, the presence of Shannon Gilbert's remains separate from the other victims raises the possibility that the killer may have changed their behavior over time. Additionally, the condition of some of the bodies, such as the dismembered remains found in a storage container, suggests that the killer may have used multiple methods of disposal. This complexity in the killer's behavior makes it difficult to establish a clear motive or identify a single psychological profile that could lead to a definitive suspect. The identity of the Gilgo Beach serial killer remains one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Despite numerous theories and suspects, no one has been definitively linked to the murders. The fact that the killer or killers have not been identified has left a sense of uncertainty and fear among the residents of Long Island. The possibility that a dangerous individual or group is still at large raises concerns about public safety and the potential for more victims. The lack of closure has also taken a toll on the families of the victims, who continue to seek answers and justice for their loved ones. The absence of a definitive suspect has prevented the community from fully healing and moving forward. The impact of the media is portrayal of the Gilgo Beach massacre on public perception is another significant aspect of the case. The extensive media coverage has both informed the public and sensationalized the events, creating a complex narrative that shapes public opinion. The graphic details and vivid descriptions of the crime scenes have contributed to the haunting nature of the case. The media's focus on the gruesome aspects of the murders has overshadowed other important details that may be crucial in solving the case. The intense media scrutiny has also placed pressure on law enforcement officials to make arrests and secure convictions. The public's demand for justice and closure has created a climate of urgency, which may compromise the thoroughness and objectivity of the investigation. Despite the challenges, the investigation into the Gilgo Beach massacre continues, with authorities utilizing advanced forensic techniques to analyze evidence and build a strong case against any potential suspects. The use of DNA technology and forensic genealogy has allowed investigators to explore new leads and uncover potential connections to other crimes. Collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies has expanded the pool of resources and expertise dedicated to the case. The collective efforts of these agencies have increased the chances of apprehending the perpetrator and providing justice for the victims. However, the complexities of the case and the passage of time continue to pose significant obstacles. Witnesses may have moved away, evidence may have been lost or degraded, and the memories of those involved may have faded. These challenges highlight the difficulties in prosecuting such crimes, especially when dealing with a serial killer who operates over a prolonged period. The emotional toll on the families and friends of the victims has been immeasurable. They have endured years of uncertainty, grief, and the constant struggle to keep the memory of their loved ones alive. The lack of closure has prevented them from finding peace and moving forward with their lives. Support groups and mental health services have been crucial in helping the families cope with the trauma and navigate the legal system. The strength and resilience of these families in the face of such tragedy is truly remarkable. In conclusion, the Gilgo Beach massacre remains one of the most haunting and perplexing criminal cases in recent history. The brutality of the crimes, the complexity of the case, and the failure to apprehend the perpetrator have left an enduring impact on the community and the nation as a whole. The investigation has unveiled a disturbing glimpse into the depths of human depravity and the challenges of bringing a serial killer to justice. While the passage of time may diminish the media attention surrounding the case, the pursuit of justice and closure for the victims must continue. The hope is that with advancements in forensic science, renewed efforts by law enforcement, and the unwavering determination of the families, the truth will eventually be revealed, providing a measure of justice for the innocent lives lost in this horrific tragedy. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, criminals are like termites. They destroy everything until they get caught. And then once they're locked up, they seem to just disappear off the face of the earth. That was certainly the case for the Gilgo Beach killer. From 2010 to 2020, his crimes sat cold, gathering dust on a shelf in the Nassau County, New York evidence room. The walls of that room were filled with the faces of victims and potential witnesses, each image staring blankly ahead as if pleading for answers. As the years ticked by, the public's interest faded, leaving the families of the victims feeling abandoned. But all the while, an army of technicians and forensic scientists toiled over every speck of evidence, determined to keep searching for answers. Slowly, painstakingly, they were chipping away at the killer's wall of secrecy. And when they broke through, what they uncovered was nothing short of astonishing. One of the first breakthroughs came from cell tower data. Back in 2011, detectives revisited phone records tied to victim Melissa Barthelemy, who had been murdered just months prior. What they found was shocking. The killer had used burner phones, prepaid untraceable numbers, to arrange meetings with the women. After Melissa's murder, he used her phone to taunt her family. He called her teenage sister and pretended to be Melissa. He told the girl she was next. He said no one would find her body. Those words hit the family like a punch to the gut, twisting with a chill the horror of their worst fears. The killer was watching them, living in their nightmare, taunting them from just out of sight. The cell tower pings revealed that these calls originated from crowded areas in New York City, Times Square, Madison Square Garden. In the sea of people, the killer was hiding in plain sight, blending into the noise of the city. The sheer audacity of it sent chills down the spines of investigators. Could the person responsible be so brazen? Did he really believe he could evade justice by disappearing into the crowds of the Big Apple? The answer was a chilling yes. He was confident, bold, and terrifyingly clever. He knew how to cover his tracks. But the burner phones held another clue, one that would prove crucial in the years to come. Their consistent pings around Massapequa Park and Midtown Manhattan painted a stark picture. The killer lived in one place and commuted to the other, suggesting someone rooted in the community, a local resident who ventured into the city for work or pleasure and preyed on unsuspecting women. This geographic profile gave investigators their first glimpse into the mind of a predator. It suggested a man who knew Long Island's highways intimately, someone comfortable navigating both the sprawling suburbs and the concrete jungle of the city. It was like trying to piece together a shattered mirror, but each shard revealed a little more about the killer's habits, his routines, his world. The burner phones told a story of a calculated killer, a methodical monster who planned his attacks, who took steps to ensure his identity remained hidden. It was a chilling narrative, one that promised to lead investigators down a twisted path, a path that would eventually bring them face to face with the darkness that lurked within the quiet suburbs. But the story doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. As we dig deeper into this chilling mystery, we'll uncover more fascinating details. So stay tuned. We're just getting started. The digital age has revolutionized forensics. Every fingerprint, every strand of DNA is a potential lead. But it's not just about collecting evidence. It's about extracting meaning from the silent testimony of the past. Take, for instance, the Gilgo Beach case. For years, the investigation seemed frozen. But slowly, technology began to chip away at the killer's wall of secrecy. One of the first advances came from cell tower data. Detectives revisited old phone records tied to the victims and discovered the killer had used burner phones, prepaid, untraceable numbers to arrange meetings with the women. Even after Melissa Barthelemy's murder, he used her phone to taunt her family, making those chilling calls to her teenage sister. Cell tower pings revealed that those calls originated from crowded areas in New York City, Times Square, Madison Square Garden. The killer was hiding in plain sight, blending into the noise of the city. Later analysis showed something even more telling. The burner phones consistently pinged towers near Massapequa Park and Midtown Manhattan, suggesting the killer lived in one area and commuted to the other. This geographic profile pointed investigators to a predator who knew Long Island's highways and was comfortable navigating both city and suburbs. At the same time, DNA testing was evolving. Early searches had turned up hair and trace evidence, but nothing usable. Years later, new forensic methods allowed scientists to extract mitochondrial DNA from old samples. It wasn't enough to name a suspect, but it narrowed possibilities. Advances in genetic genealogy, the same technique used to catch the Golden State Killer, opened new hope that one day the smallest fragment of DNA could finally unmask the predator. Investigators also turned to geographic profiling. By analyzing where bodies were left, experts concluded the killer likely had a base of operations close to Gilgo Beach. Dumping victims in such a specific area suggested comfort and routine. It wasn't random. It was home turf. Each breakthrough pushed the case forward, even if only inches at a time. The burner phones, the DNA, the geographic profile, they began sketching a shadowy figure. A man living quietly in plain sight, moving through the same neighborhoods as everyone else while hiding the darkest of secrets. For over a decade, technology hunted him. And eventually, it would bring detectives closer than ever before to the face behind the mystery. You know, back in 2011, when cell phone data first revealed the killer's possible location, it was a game changer. Up until then, the investigation had been stuck in a rut, but suddenly investigators had a starting point, a potential hotspot for the killer's activity. It was like having a treasure map leading directly to the criminal's doorstep. This led to a series of meticulously planned surveillance operations. Teams of detectives staked out the area, observing residents, collecting information, piecing together daily routines. It was a challenging task considering the sheer number of people who lived there. But these men were not daunted. Day in and day out, they combed through hours of footage, hoping to spot a peculiar behavior, an unusual pattern, anything that could lead them to the killer. Among the residents living in that area was a former police officer named John Doe. Now, we can't reveal his real name due to legal reasons, but we can tell you that John Doe became a person of interest early on in the investigation. You see, he had been living in that exact area during the time that the murders occurred. Additionally, his occupation as a former law enforcement officer made him uniquely familiar with police procedures and forensic techniques. This background could have given him insight into how the police were conducting their investigation, possibly allowing him to avoid detection. As the officers continued their surveillance, they noticed certain things about Mr. Doe's behavior. He kept a low profile, always seeming to blend into the crowd. He drove a nondescript car and never drew much attention to himself. These observations were intriguing because they matched the description of the elusive killer that had been haunting the dreams of the investigators for years. Could this unassuming man be the monster they had been searching for? The idea was preposterous, yet the data was undeniable. John Doe's every move was now under scrutiny. Every public appearance, every grocery run, every interaction with his neighbors was recorded, analyzed, and discussed in hushed tones in the dimly lit rooms of the police station. The stakes were high. If they were right, they were on the verge of breaking the case wide open. If they were wrong, they risked ruining the life of an innocent man. As the days turned into weeks, the detectives grew increasingly convinced that John Doe was the killer. However, they needed irrefutable evidence to make an arrest. The question was, how do you trap a ghost who seems to vanish into thin air whenever you come close? Well, that's what the police were determined to find out. They had a name, a face, and a possible motive. All they needed now was proof, and that brings us to the most exciting part of this story. The moment when the walls of secrecy finally crumbled and the face behind the Gilgo Beach mystery was unmasked. They say a lie has got to be the most cowardly way to live. You're always looking over your shoulder waiting for somebody to find out. Well, for Rex Heuermann, the jig is up. His life is turned upside down. A predator who hunted for more than a decade in plain sight is now caged himself like the animals he kept at his Montauk home. Who is this man, and how did he get here? For more than a decade, the identity of the Long Island serial killer haunted investigators and terrified the public. Then in July 2023, the mystery cracked wide open with a name no one expected, Rex Heuermann. Heuermann was a 59-year-old married architect, a father of two, living quietly in Massapequa Park, just miles from Gilgo Beach. By day, he commuted to Manhattan, working in a midtown office near the bustle of Fifth Avenue. To neighbors, he seemed ordinary, if a little eccentric. He was the man fixing up his house, the guy they saw at the train station. No one imagined he might be hiding a monstrous secret. The breakthrough came from a piece of trash. Investigators had long suspected Heuermann after geographic profiling placed the killer's home base near his neighborhood. They tracked him quietly, gathering evidence. Then one night, Heuermann threw away a pizza box. Detectives retrieved the discarded crust, tested it, and found DNA that matched evidence collected from one of the Gilgo Four. It was the link they had waited years for. Science catching the killer through the smallest detail. When police finally moved in, The shock rippled through the community. News footage captured neighbors staring in disbelief as investigators swarmed his modest home. One woman told reporters, "He seemed normal, just a quiet man on our block." Another described him as distant, but never dangerous. The mask of normalcy had worked for decades, but beneath that mask, detectives uncovered a dark double life. Online searches revealed Heuermann's obsession with violent pornography and disturbing fantasies. He had meticulously studied the investigation, reading everything he could about the Gilgo Beach murders. His digital footprint showed a man consumed by sadistic cravings, hiding them behind the facade of a suburban husband and professional architect. The arrest stunned not just Long Island, but the entire country. After years of dead ends, there was finally a suspect in custody. Yet the news brought as many questions as answers. Was Heuermann truly the Long Island serial killer, responsible for all the bodies found along the coast? Or only the Gilgo Four? Had he acted alone, or were other predators still out there? The image of Rex Heuermann, family man, architect, commuter, shattered the community's sense of safety. The monster wasn't a shadowy stranger, he was the man next door. Now, in a world where true crime is the fastest-growing genre in media, we tell these stories because they matter. Crime podcasts have become the new true crime TV shows, and that means that everyone is talking about this case, but not everyone is getting the full story. That's why we are so excited to partner with Wondery to bring you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Wondery is home to some of the best true crime podcasts out there, like Root of Evil, which explores the hidden history of Satanism and its influence on some of America's most notorious crimes. Or American Scandal, which dives into some of the most shocking political scandals in U.S. history. I am obsessed with their podcast, Someone Knows Something, where host David Ridgen reopens cold cases with the help of a digital team, giving a voice to the voiceless and seeking justice for those who have long been forgotten. Wondery is also home to my new podcast, Crime Spree. Join me and a rotating cast of co-hosts as we take you inside the mind of a serial killer or notorious criminal, breaking down their most heinous acts and learning what really drove them to commit unthinkable crimes. Our first season, which premieres on September, will be focused on the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, and we have brand new episodes every Thursday. Whether you're a true crime fanatic or just starting to dip your toes into the genre, Wondery has something for everyone. So sign up to listen to a new exclusive episode of Someone Knows Something every month, plus all of Wondery's incredible ad-free content. Plus, when you sign up with our link, you'll get an additional 60 days to explore all of Wondery's amazing podcasts. Don't miss out. Head to the website or click the link in the description below to start listening today. Rex Heuermann was born in New York City on March 24, 1963. His early life remains largely a mystery, hidden behind closed doors and whispered rumors. What we know comes from fragmented glimpses, hints of a troubled past that foreshadowed the darkness to come. We know he grew up in a middle-class family, one of 3 siblings, all boys. His father, an auto worker, instilled discipline, sometimes bordering on harshness. There was little room for sentimentality in their home. As one neighbor recalled of Rex's childhood, it was a strict household. He had chores, he had curfews. These formative years seem to have left an indelible mark on Rex. Despite his age, he lived at home until he was 26, a grown man still under the thumb of authority. When he eventually moved out, he chose Massapequa, a community that mirrored the conservative values of his upbringing. He purchased a modest split-level home on a quiet tree-lined street. From the outside, it looked like any other, but behind the facade, things were different. In the basement of that house lived the makings of a monster. In the labyrinth of concrete and shadows, Rex created a bizarre shrine to his darkest desires. Here, amidst the clutter of power tools and household clutter, he built a collection of disturbing items. Animal bones lay scattered around, remnants of a macabre menagerie that included alligators, lizards, and turtles. Taxidermied creatures stared blankly, frozen in the throes of their final moments. This underground lair became the nexus of Rex's warped psyche, a physical manifestation of the violent thoughts that consumed his mind. But the walls of the house held other secrets, too. Rex's bedroom became a war room of sorts, a place where he tracked the investigation into the very crimes he was committing. Newspapers, magazines, and books lay strewn about, each page detailing the latest twists and turns in the search for the Long Island serial killer. As if studying for an exam he knew too well, Rex absorbed every morsel of information, reveling in the fear that gripped his community. All the while, he remained the picture of normalcy upstairs, playing the role of devoted husband and caring father. He doted on his wife, lavishing her with gifts and compliments. When he took their children to school, he was the quintessential dad, chatting with other parents and waving goodbye from the car window. No one suspected the darkness that festered within him, nurtured in the dank basement and fueled by the attention he received in the newspaper. Rex Heuermann was leading a double life, a duality that allowed him to stalk his victims without detection. He was Mr. Next Door and the Long Island serial killer, a dichotomy that chilled investigators to the bone. As the investigation into the Gilgo Beach murders intensified, the pressure mounted on Rex. Each new lead, each piece of evidence brought him closer to the edge. Aware of the tightening net, he began making changes, both big and small, in an attempt to throw off the scent of the police. He traded in his pickup truck, opting for a more nondescript car. He altered his appearance, growing a beard to cover the face that witnesses had already seen. But despite these efforts, one thing remained constant: the chilling calm that radiated from him. Even as the body count rose, Rex went about his life unfazed. It was as if the lives he snuffed out meant nothing to him. This unnerving composure was his greatest asset, allowing him to blend seamlessly into the background. While others panicked, he stood stoic, his emotions carefully concealed behind a mask of normality. Eventually, though, the facade would crumble, and the true face of the Long Island serial killer would be revealed. When the news broke that Rex Heuermann was arrested for the Gilgo Beach murders, the tight-knit community of Massapequa was left reeling. A man they had seen at local events and recognized by name was the alleged monster behind some of the most heinous crimes in recent history. It was a jarring contrast, a dissonance between what they knew and what the authorities had unveiled. Some residents expressed shock and disbelief, struggling to reconcile the image of Heuermann as a family man with the brutality of the crimes he was accused of. Others grappled with feelings of betrayal and violation, wondering how someone could live among them, preying on vulnerable women while maintaining a facade of normalcy. The revelation shook the collective psyche of the community, leaving many questioning the nature of evil itself and the precariousness of their own sense of security. Yet amid the shock and sorrow, there was also a glimmer of relief, a collective exhale of a community that had lived in fear for over a decade. With a suspect in custody, there was hope that justice would finally be served. The arrest marked a significant turning point in the case. Yet it also raised a host of new questions. Was Heuermann solely responsible for the Gilgo Beach killings, or were there accomplices involved? And what about the other unsolved cases along the Long Island serial killer? The journey towards resolution was far from over, but as the legal process unfolded, it was clear that the impact on Massapequa would be profound and lasting. The image of Heuermann stalking his victims was a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly idyllic surface. It was a trauma that would forever tarnish their sense of safety and the innocence of their community. The apprehension of Rex Heuermann brought a semblance of closure to a chapter that had shaken the nation. But the haunting specter of his crimes continued to linger. The scars on the community of Massapequa ran deep, a testament to the enduring impact of fear and the relentless pursuit of justice. The case of the Long Island serial killer became a grim chapter in their history, a shadow that would continue to fall over their town for years to come. As you probably already know, in July of 2023, 59-year-old Rex Heuermann was arrested in connection to the deaths of 3 women whose bodies were found on Gilgo Beach on Long Island, New York. The 3 women were Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. All 3 were sex workers, and they vanished in 2010 after meeting with a client online. Their bodies, along with several others, were eventually discovered near Oakwood Beach and Gilgo Beach in Suffolk County, New York. The case became known as the Gilgo Beach murders, or the Long Island serial killer case. In 2023, Rex Heuermann was charged with the murders of those 3 women. He has also been identified as a person of interest in the death of a 4th woman, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Her body was found on the same beach where the other 3 women were found, but a few months earlier. In February of 2011, all 4 women were sex workers who had used Craigslist to advertise their services. A lot of people believe that this is the connection between the victims. Perhaps this is the motive behind the crimes. Maybe the killer specifically targeted sex workers, or maybe it was just a coincidence. Rex Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. In an effort to connect him to the victims, prosecutors said that they have physical evidence, including DNA, and that they have circumstantial evidence such as cell phone records. For instance, cell phone records show that Heuermann called burner phones that were used to contact the victim prior to their disappearances. During the investigation into Heuermann's home, authorities reportedly found women's clothing in his basement, including a dress that matched the description of one worn by Megan Waterman in a photograph. But these are just the details that we know about. We don't know what kind of DNA evidence they have, or if any of the victims' DNA was found at the crime scenes or at his house. So far, we don't know how they connected him to the killings. The story doesn't end there either. Along Gilgo Beach and Jones Beach, investigators uncovered at least 10 sets of remains over the years. Some belonged to women who seemed to have similar backgrounds. Others didn't. There were dismembered bodies, remains scattered miles apart, and even a child. These victims do not all fit the pattern. Not all can be tied directly to Heuermann. So the question is, could there have been more than one killer using the same dumping grounds? Was there more than one murderer operating in the area at the same time? Or was it just one guy, Rex Heuermann, acting alone? If we go back to 2023, when Heuermann was first arrested, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney K. Harrison said that investigators believe that Heuermann acted alone in the killings of Barthelemy, Waterman, and Costello. However, he also stated that the investigation is continuing and that Heuermann remains the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Now, we don't know if this means that they believe that he acted alone in that particular case too, or if they just haven't decided yet. We don't know if the police believe that he was solely responsible for all the other victims whose bodies were found nearby either. During a court hearing, Assistant District Attorney Alana Hassert admitted that the evidence against Heuermann is mostly circumstantial, but she argued that it is strong. The only direct evidence that we know of is the DNA. Of course, DNA can be incredibly powerful, but it can also be incredibly misleading. Sometimes it gets misinterpreted. Sometimes contamination happens. Sometimes it's inconclusive. We don't know what type of DNA evidence they have in this case, but we do know that they have something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be charging him with these murders. Another interesting thing to consider is that the timeline of the alleged crimes does not really make sense. All of the victims in which Heuermann has been charged or is a person of interest were killed around 2010. Yet authorities say that they have DNA connecting him to some of the murders that date back to 2006. Maybe the DNA evidence is strong enough to connect him to those victims. But if it is, why hasn't he been charged with their murders? If it isn't, then why do the police claim to have DNA evidence connecting him to anything at all? Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. Aside from the inconsistencies, the defense is attempting to argue reasonable doubt by claiming that there were other suspects in the case and that the police overlooked them in favor of pursuing Heuermann. One example they gave was a man named John Bove. According to the defense, Bova was questioned by police multiple times over the years, but he was never officially considered a suspect, according to them. Bove died in 2021, so obviously he cannot defend himself, but his attorney told reporters that Bove was innocent and that he actually cooperated with police despite being a person of interest. Maybe the police had their sights set on Rex Heuermann from the beginning, and that's why they didn't seriously pursue John Bove as a suspect. Or maybe they did investigate Bove and they simply couldn't connect him to the murders. The truth is, we don't know because we don't know what evidence they have against Heuermann or anyone else in this case. A lot of people have also brought up Shannon Gilbert. You may remember that her disappearance in 2010 is what kicked off the entire Gilgo Beach investigation. She vanished while traveling to meet a client. At the time, police claimed that she likely drowned after getting lost in the maze of waterways in Manorville, New York. Several years later, though, her family received a tip that she was murdered and that her body was buried on Gilgo Beach. When police searched the area, they found her remains about a half-mile away from where they had previously searched. They had already dug up the entire beach looking for her body after she disappeared. So the question is, why did they miss her the first time? And if they were searching for her body, why did they assume that she had drowned in the first place? I mean, her body was found on a beach, so maybe they just thought that's where she would be. I don't know. Shanann Gilbert's remains were found in 2011, but to this day, her death remains one of the most debated parts of this case. Her mother says that she absolutely did not drown. So it's possible that the police jumped to the conclusion that she drowned because they wanted to rule her death as accidental and move on. Maybe they thought that it was just a sad, unfortunate situation, a terrible accident that just happened to happen on a beach. The problem is, they failed to look for a potential serial killer who may have been targeting sex workers. So to answer the question posed in the title of this video, will we ever really know who the Long Island serial killer is? I would have to say probably not. Maybe we'll find out that Rex Heuermann acted alone. But I think that there's a good chance that we'll never get the full story. There seems to be a lot of holes in the narrative, and we are not getting the full story from law enforcement. Obviously, they want to protect the integrity of the investigation, but they're not telling us much at all. When someone is murdered, their story doesn't end. It echoes through the lives they touched, the family they left behind, and the community they were a part of. Sometimes those echoes lead to change. For over a decade, the Gilgo Beach murders captivated and horrified the nation. 4 women found dead on a desolate stretch of coastline, their bodies bearing the marks of a violent, gruesome fate. Their killer remained elusive, leaving behind a haunting mystery that seemed destined to go unsolved. But as the years passed, the case refused to fade from the headlines. And recently, a breakthrough. A man has been arrested in connection with these killings, bringing a semblance of resolution to a case that shook the nation. In the aftermath of this chilling crime, the nation grappled not just with the horror of the murders themselves, but also with the unsettling questions they raised about vulnerability, societal biases, and the pursuit of justice. At its core, the Gilgo Beach story was a tragedy of immense proportions. 4 young women, Amber Costello, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Barbara Burns, lost their lives in a violent and disturbing manner. Their bodies discovered along Ocean Parkway, a grim testament to a killer's brutality. The case immediately captured the attention of a community and law enforcement officials who began a meticulous investigation into their deaths. But as the probe progressed, it soon became clear that this was no ordinary crime spree. Each woman had worked as an escort, and the killer seemed to have specifically targeted those involved in online sex work. This chilling realization introduced a disturbing element to the investigation. These women, often stigmatized and marginalized due to their profession, had their lives cut short. And with each passing day without an arrest, fear and frustration grew among their families and friends. They accused law enforcement of failing to take their loved ones' disappearances seriously believing that the police dismissed their concerns because of the nature of the women's work. The passage of time only intensified the agony for the families. As weeks turned into months and years, the hope of finding the killer and bringing him to justice seemed to dwindle. The scars of their loss deepened, turning into a profound sense of injustice. They yearned for answers, for a resolution that had eluded them for so long. In the years since then, the urgency to find the women's killer grew. The slow pace of the investigation became a point of contention. Whispers of police incompetence and apathy circulated through the tight-knit community. Many believed that if the victims were not sex workers, the response would have been swifter and more intense. The Gilgo case became a symbol of a larger societal issue, highlighting the vulnerabilities of sex workers and the biases they often face, even in the pursuit of justice. The advent of new technology and investigative techniques eventually led to a breakthrough. Authorities were able to connect several of the killings to one individual through forensic analysis and investigative work. Finally, there was a face to put to the monster who had haunted the community for so long. With this development, the hopes for justice were reignited. The families who had endured years of sorrow and frustration saw a glimmer of light at the end of a very long tunnel. Though a trial is still pending, the arrest itself brought a sense of relief. It signified that the tireless efforts of the investigators had borne fruit, and that, perhaps, after all this time, justice was within reach. The arrest also served as a stark reminder of the systemic failures that had allowed this killer to remain at large for so long. It raised questions about the protocols and procedures that had been in place and whether they had been adequate. The case became a catalyst for change, pushing law enforcement agencies to reevaluate their strategies and improve their response to such heinous crimes. As the legal process unfolds, the nation is left to grapple with the broader implications of the case. The Gilgo Beach murders were not just a series of horrific crimes, they were a reflection of societal biases, systemic failures, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. What do you think? Was this a fair sentence for Rex Heuermann? And I'll see you next time. For more than a decade, the Long Island serial killer haunted the edges of Gilgo Beach, a predator lurking in plain sight. By day, he was a commuter, a husband, a seemingly ordinary neighbor. But by night, he was a monster in the making, preying on vulnerable women and leading them to a trap from which there was no return. The truth is terrifying not only because of what was done, but because of how long it went unnoticed. Bodies lay just beyond the dunes, hidden in burlap and brush, while families begged for answers. For years, the marshes whispered secrets that no one was ready to hear. Today, we know his name. Rex Heuermann is behind bars, his face hidden by a blue folder in court. But the case is far from closed. Not every victim has been identified. Not every question has been answered. Theories of multiple killers linger, and Shanann Gilbert's fate remains one of the most haunting mysteries of all. The legacy of Gilgo Beach is more than crime. It's a chilling reminder of the invisible, the people society too often overlooks, the dangers that thrive in silence, and the monsters who live not in shadows, but in our neighborhoods, passing unnoticed until it's too late. Heuermann was a monster, yes. But so were the officials who failed to connect the dots, the cops and pathologists who let too many victims go unidentified, the system that failed to prioritize the missing, the families who lost their daughters, sisters, and friends. All of their lives were irrevocably altered by the choices others made. And in the years since, they've had to fight not only for justice, but for recognition, for acknowledgement, for a chance at closure. It's easy to look back now and see the signs, the missed opportunities, the red flags that should have been dealt with. But that's the thing about hindsight. It's always 20/20. What we do know is that change can happen. The case forced a reckoning, a moment of uncomfortable truth. And in the painful process of acknowledging what went wrong, we can do better. We must do better. But one truth still lingers like a ghost over the sand and salt air. The full story has yet to be told. We may know his name, but the darkness along Gilgo Beach has not yet lifted. Thanks for watching CaseVault. Don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts. And make sure to subscribe for more chilling true crime stories every week.